Hello, hello, hello. Welcome at Wayfact. Today with a little bit of a different topic than usual because usually we talk about Web3, smart contracts, blockchain, and all that crazy stuff that's floating around regarding that topic. But today we will talk about a very, very different kind of matter. And it's about agencies in general. And if you know myself, I'm the owner of Wayfact, which is in fact a product studio, which could be described as some sort of an agency. So I might be biased in some sense, but I try not to be. And in this quick live session, it will be around 10 to 15 minutes max. I try to keep it that way. We'll talk about what the main issues with agency models, with the agency model actually are, how we could solve them, and how to actually better from a client perspective, like if you're yourself right now and you engage or plan to engage with any kind of agency, but more specifically with software agencies, and as well, if you're agency owner yourself or a freelancer and plan to create your own agency or build your own agency, then this might be for you. So first of all, we all know these horror stories around software agencies, right? Agencies that deliver faulty software that hasn't been delivered at the set deadline, or expenses were just way higher than expected. But what's the real issue at hand? Usually, it's a combination of a combination of bad communication, lack of reporting, unforeseen risks, and tasks that have not been accounted for. So as you can see, there are a lot of different factors that plug into that. And if you had a bad experience with an agency, it might be a combination of those few things. Of course, it's always different and has to be considered on a so one by one basis. But that in general is the main idea and the experience that we, uh, let's say, also, those are the main reasons on one hand that we see when we engaged ourselves from a client perspective with other agencies as well, but also when we, of course, made some mistakes with clients. So every business owner is not safe from any mistakes, let's put it that way, right? So the first thing I wanna talk about today in that regard is the so-called devil's quadrangle. You might not be familiar with that one, but there's a more known, let's say, concept around there, the magic triangle. And what is it? The magic triangle consists of three project constraints that are most specific, also that might be best applicable to, let's say, software projects, but of course it can be applied to marketing agencies as well and so on and so forth. But from a purely software perspective, it's time, cost, and scope. Which means whenever you have a project, you have these three main constraints, right? If you want to have it fast, it's most likely to be more expensive and will have a smaller scope, right? So you have the trade-off on those two other factors. If you want to have it cheap, well, it might take longer, not necessarily, but could be. And the scope might be much smaller as well because the agency or the freelancer can't deliver as big of a project as you want because you don't have the budget for it. And if you think through it, there's actually a fourth aspect to it, and that's where the extended version comes into play. It's a devil's quadrangle, which introduces or actually extracts out of the scope the quality aspect itself, which means you now have cost, scope, time, and quality. So if you want to have the highest quality software ever, which might be the case, for example, if uh, there are if there's no room for errors, let's put it that way, right? You are developing software that if it fails, risks humans or whatever life, right? It risks human life, for example. If you develop rocket software or airplane software or something like that, or let's go away from the life risk, right, human risk, and more on the financial side, you definitely don't want to be responsible as a software developer for companies or people losing lots of money, right? So if it's about financial software or let's go back to humans healthcare software and these kind of things, there's really like no room for error. So you want to ensure maximum quality. And maximum quality has a couple of consequences, of course. The software becomes much more complex and therefore also much more complex in sense of much more steps in terms of how to develop secure, safe and reliable software. That's what makes the software itself complex, and that results in high costs. It results in delayed or longer project cycles, which means it takes much longer to get the project out there. And also from a scope perspective, you definitely, if you want to have a really high quality, reliable software, you want to reduce the amount of features that you deliver because the more features you have, the more risk and the more things you need to evaluate, test to actually make your software really safe and reliable. So, and every feature usually risks all the other aspects of the software in terms of how reliable they are, because some features might have implications on other features as well, which might be a little bit difficult to comprehend, but I would say trust me, bro, on that one. So that's the first aspect, right? We have these four aspects when developing a software project, and the issue now is not the trade-offs itself, but the misalignment of clients, like the person that is actually paying the developer or the software agency, and actually and the software agency itself when delivering the software. There's a misalignment of expectations. Like I know it myself. A client comes to us and says, "Oh, I have that budget, right? And I want to build that, right?" And there's this expectation that all these features, that budget, can be done in a really fast time frame and at the same time in a high quality, which is not possible, right? You always have to make a trade-off. And the issue now here is, as a software agency or as a software developer yourself, the responsibility is actually on your side to align the client's expectations, to reset their expectations, and to make it clear what you want costs that much, right? If you're fine with that time frame, it costs that much. If we strike that feature because it doesn't seem to be that important for you, or at least not in that project phase, then it costs less. And at the same time, we are able, maybe, if we keep the costs the same, to deliver higher quality and to make it more reliable, and so on and so forth, right? So if you are Google, Alphabet, Facebook, whoever, you definitely want to ensure that software has a much higher quality. Just think about Google's new search generative engine, if that's the right name, I think so, SGE. When you type in something in Google, it gives you a AI generated response on what your answer to your question may be, right? And there were a lot of reports on the internet like how wrong these things actually were. I read things like Google recommended that you eat stones and these kind of things, which of course is silly. Everyone should hopefully know that. But people expected more of Google, right? Because Google has the resources, right? Cost shouldn't be a constraint here. Time, usually, it depends on, or I think, sorry, that's a great example here. Time was a constraint for them a priority. They, from my understanding, if I interpret it correctly, um, they wanted to launch fast, right? They were under high pressure in related to all these AI launches, people calling the death of Google and all these things, right? ChatGPT, Bing with having ChatGPT 4 natively integrated, these kind of things. And that, of course, really risks Google as a business model, right? So time was a constraint as well, or time was a constraint. So they weren't able to extend the project duration. They had to deliver fast. The scope itself, that's maybe something to argue about, but they had to deliver at least a certain amount of feature set, right? It wouldn't be sufficient enough to just have some kind of really minimal feature that does some kind of highlighting or something like that. People were already expecting something bigger, right? With all these launches out there, they expected that Google is delivering something big as well, and that as a public company, they had to make the investors happy, of course. So maybe scope is something that they could play around with and possibly did, but in the end, they had to deliver something like what they did, that you type in on the search bar and you get a response to that, which is already a highly reduced scope, which is one simple feature. Simple in terms of the process, like the outcome, but very complex in how you build it. So with these things, like looking at these things, quality, I don't know about the cost, right? If they had a really constrained budget, I don't think so, because it was most likely very important. But developing AI models is a highly capital intensive and very difficult task. So quality, cost, also the the trade-offs they had made were most likely quality, because that's what the reports say, right? And time. They had to launch fast. So, no, not time. I'm a little bit confused today. Sorry for that. So quality was the key constraint, right? They wanted to launch fast, and for that reason, they degraded on the quality. So that's another, or that's an example for the Devil's Quadrangle and how it could influence your own project as well, right? So, what has it to do with agencies or software developers? It's really about aligning expectations. That's it, right? If you as a client know I have to make this trade off, like what trade off am I willing to make, then everything would be clear, right? So it's really, in the end, a communication issue. It's not a project issue, it's not a budget issue, it's not a scope, quality, or time issue. It's really about aligning expectations, making it really, really, really clear, and making no compromises on communication, like basically just being honest, and of course being experienced enough to actually communicate that to, as a developer or software agency yourself, to tell them, hey, this is the risk, or this is where we need to make a trade-off here to get to the outcome that you want. So that's, in 15 minutes, really quick, about the Devil's Quadrangle. And sorry that I was a little bit all over the place today. So yeah, if you have feedback for me, if you are curious and other sessions like that, please let me know. So thank you for watching, and yeah, see you next time.